Oh, do I have a great sewing pattern for you today? And it's the perfect time to be releasing this because the holidays are just around the corner and you guys are going to want to be sewing up a bunch of these double vision cases this holiday season. They make excellent gifts. They only take about an hour to an hour and a half to sew up. And once you've made several of them, you can get that down to about 45 minutes. Here is my sunglasses and my prescription glasses held together in one case with a divider down the center. You can also keep your readers in there with you. This case also is great for his and hers whenever you are traveling. You both can keep your glasses safe in one case together. Just take a look at all of the double vision cases that I've been busy sewing up. I really enjoy making these. It allows you to use lots of bright, colorful fabrics. There is a little bit of binding that is required on the sides of the case. You can use waterproof canvas like I've done on this one, or you can make your own binding, which I've done on this one. So it depends on the look that you're going for. It requires very minimal fabric, only one magnetic snap or a hidden magnetic snap, which I've done on this one. And I do walk you through the sewing tutorial on how to do the hidden magnetic snap if you're interested in that. We do now sell the hidden magnetic snaps on my website at sewyours.com, so you guys can go ahead and pick up some if you're wanting to make some double vision cases for this holiday season. Another great thing about the double vision case, because it requires such minimal fabric, hardware, and time, you're going to love to make these for your craft fairs, and you're going to be able to keep your price point relatively low since you don't have much time and materials involved in making the double vision case. So here is another version that I've gone ahead and made using the magnetic snap, and there is the inside. I do recommend making your first one all in quilting cotton. It can be a little challenging to turn it right side out if you're using thicker fabrics, but once you've gone ahead and made one or two of them, feel free to go ahead and use a thinner vinyl or a cork fabric for the exterior of your double vision case. Here is another version that I have made, and I went ahead and did the waterproof canvas binding on the side of this one. I added a handmade bag tag, which are available on our website for purchase, to this one. So you can do the handmade bag tag or your custom bag tag on the flap closure here of your double vision case. This is the one that I went ahead and made in a thin vinyl, and I went with a waterproof canvas for the lining, and that worked out really well. So I love making these because I can use up all of my bright, cheerful, colorful fabrics. You do want to consider the non-directional fabrics for your double vision case since the fabric is wrapping around the entire outside of the case. So do keep that in mind when you are selecting your fabrics. Here is another version that I went ahead and made up. So I am just going to go ahead and jump in and we're going to start making up our double vision case. Okay, let's go ahead and go over all of the pieces that make up the double vision case, and there isn't much. That is why this is such a quick sew. So let's go ahead and talk about the fabrics first. I do recommend sticking with a non-directional fabric here because you are going to be folding it around on itself. Now this one here is slightly non-directional as well as this one, but you can totally get away with it, which I went ahead and did. So we've got our quilting cotton here. This is a pattern piece A. You need an exterior and a lining piece. And I've gone ahead and ironed on some woven interfacing to both of these pieces right here. This is my Sew Woven Fusible Interfacing you can get on my website. Now for your very first one, I do recommend sticking with quilting cotton just to gauge how you like turning this right side out, because that is the trickiest part with this particular pattern because it is such a narrow channel right here. It could be a little difficult to turn right side out if you're using vinyl or cork, but if you're on an industrial or a semi-industrial machine, on your second one, if you want to give it a go with some thinner vinyl or cork, you can go ahead and do that. I will show you later in the video a little tip, a little modification to the pattern if you decide to go ahead and use some vinyl or some cork. So stay tuned for that. So that's pattern piece A. Next, we have pattern piece B. This is our stabilizer piece, and I'm using Decavo Light right here. You could go ahead and make this with some fusible fleece if you'd like instead. Next, we have pattern piece C. This is our divider, and you're going to need your woven interfacing iron to the back of that. And then, as you can see here on my stabilizer piece, I've cut out a hole in the actual stabilizer, and that is indicated on the pattern piece. This is only going to be applicable if you are using a hidden magnetic snap like I am right here. If you're using a regular magnetic snap, then you can go ahead and skip the step with cutting out the hole in the stabilizer. Lastly, we need a little bit of binding. Now, if you are not comfortable with binding, this is the project that I highly recommend giving it a go because it's a really simple, quick binding. I am going to be making my own binding and showing you how to do that, but you can go ahead and do a fold over elastic. This is all of the colors of fold over elastic we sell on our website. So this is 1-inch wide fold over elastic, so you can do that instead. Or you can go with a waterproof canvas binding that you make your own. I cut this out previously and just rolled it up so I have it handy whenever I wanted to use some white fold over elastic. And this is 1-inch wide. So that is your options for binding, in addition to double fold bias binding that you can purchase at the store. You can use that as well, completely up to you. But like I said, I'm going to show you how to do your own binding today because it's really simple to do. And I like the clean look of the binding that matches my exterior. I've done a few here with some waterproof canvas, so that does give you a little bit of contrast right there. So it depends on the look that you're going for, if you want to use some contrasting binding or you want to go ahead and just make your own binding to match your exterior. So let's go ahead and jump on in and start making up our double vision case. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is cut out the hole on your stabilizer, which is pattern piece B, if you're using a hidden magnetic snap. If you're not, you can skip this step. But all you need to do is cut the hole on the pattern piece itself. Lay that on top of your stabilizer, and you can go ahead and use a pen to just go ahead and trace the marking there for the hole. And you can come in and use your scissors to cut the hole out. Or if you have a die like I do here, this is a set that I purchased on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description box below so you guys can check that out. All I did for mine was pick the die that was closest to the size of the hole and placed that on top of where I traced. Then just use a hammer and hammer that to cut out the hole. So if you are doing the hidden magnetic snap, make sure that the hole is large enough for your hidden magnetic snap. There are different sizes available. So you can see right here, this is plenty big enough. I need to make sure that I have nice clear contact with the magnet, and I don't want my stabilizer getting in the way. So if your magnet is larger than the hole, then just go ahead and make your hole a little bit larger. So go ahead and get that done. And then you're going to grab pattern piece A, so your exterior piece right here. And we need to now place our stabilizer on top of the wrong side. I've already gone ahead and marked this out, but I can see that my pen's kind of already disappearing. So let's do this again, and I'll show you what I've done. So we're measuring over 1/2 inch from this cutout right here, as well as 1/2 inch from this flap edge right here. And so I just grab my ruler and I'm looking at the line right here, matching up that edge with the 1/2 inch mark, in addition to the 1/2 inch up here on the top. And I'm going to come in and make a marking right there. I'll repeat this for the opposite side, measuring in 1/2 inch. And do the same thing for the bottom, 1/2 inch up, and for the opposite side as well. Now this will give me a nice centering point here to center my stabilizer. So you can see my lines now. So now all I need to do is take my stabilizer and center that here. Take this over to my iron or my heat press and secure this into place. So let me get that done. All right, now it's time for us to make our markings on our fabric for our hidden magnetic snap, or if we're using a regular magnetic snap. So first off, I'm going to show you the hidden magnetic snap. And with the hidden magnetic snap, we're going to use the lining piece here. And we're going to be making the markings on the wrong side of our lining. Grab pattern piece A and lay that on top of the wrong side of the lining. And for your hidden magnetic snap, you are going to go ahead and make the markings here on the top and the bottom. So as you can see right here, I've already punched a hole in my paper right here where it says hidden magnetic snap. And I've done that for both these pieces right here. And I transferred over that little dot right there where the holes are. So we've already got the markings there. So that is how you're going to do it for the hidden magnetic snap. Now for the regular magnetic snap, you're going to be using your exterior piece right here. And on our exterior, we're going to be making the placement for the female magnetic snap here on the bottom. So the female magnetic snap side is this one right here. So go ahead and lay this on top. Transfer the marking right here on your exterior for the female portion of your snap, which will be installing. And then on our lining piece, we need to make the markings for the male portion of the snap. So on the top right here, this is for the male magnetic snap, and make your marking right there on the lining portion. So once you've got that done, we can move forward, whichever way you're doing, whichever magnetic snap that you're doing. So since I am doing the hidden magnetic snap, let's go ahead now and show you how to place those. All right, I'm going to go ahead and explain the differences in the hidden magnetic snaps. Now, if you're ordering them from me, you're going to get one that is more of like a gold color, and the other one's going to be a nickel color, and those are basically buddies. So if you flip them over, there is a flat side, and then there is a rounded side, and it's probably going to be too hard to see on camera, but this is the rounded side, so the edges round over, and this is the flat side. So the flat sides are what has the most magnetic power, and those are the ones that ultimately we want to be touching whenever we are closing our double vision case. So I have instructions on the pattern piece itself, so that way you know exactly how to place your hidden magnetic snaps. So let's talk about the bottom placement right here. You're going to grab one of your hidden magnetic snaps, and this one should be placed so that the rounded side is touching the wrong side of the lining. So I have the rounded side touching the upper part right here. This is the flat side. I'm going to go ahead and center that over the dot, and I'm going to go ahead and sew that into place along the outside edge of the plastic here on the magnetic snap. And then I'm going to go ahead and place the top one, and the top one is going to be the opposite. So my flat side is going to be touching the wrong side of the lining. So I have flat side down, and I'm going to go ahead now and sew that into place. Okay, I've got my magnetic snaps now sewn into place. So you can just check your work to make sure that you've got the proper placement. So all I'm going to do is fold this over just like this. And I did it correctly because I've got good magnetic force right here. So that now we can go ahead and move on with sewing this together. But I want to pause for a moment and show you how to do the regular magnetic snaps. So on my exterior piece, you're going to go ahead and install your female magnetic snap down here on the bottom where you've placed your marking. So it should be just like this. And then for the male portion, you're going to go ahead and install that on the top portion here of the flap, just like this. So go ahead and get that done if you're using a regular magnetic snap. I'm going to go ahead and set the exterior and the lining aside for a moment, and we're going to work on our divider. So here is our divider. Let's just go ahead and place this right sides together, matching up the short side. I'm going to take this over to our sewing machine and sew this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you've got that sewn, you can go ahead and trim down your seam allowance to about 1/4 of an inch. And then turn this right side out. You can press it with an iron or finger press, whichever you prefer. And I'm going to now take this over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to top stitch here at 1/8 of an inch along the top and the bottom edge, and then I'm going to base stitch the left and the right hand side at 1/8 of an inch. Okay, our divider is now complete. Let's go ahead and set that aside. So we're going to go ahead and work on our binding. So I am making my own binding. If you're using fold over elastic, double fold bias tape, or waterproof canvas binding, you can skip this step as you don't need to make your own binding. So let me explain what I've done right here. So what I went ahead and did is took my binding pieces. I drew a line 1/2 of an inch away from each of these short raw edges. I folded over the raw edge to meet that line that I drew, pressed it with my iron, did that for all 4 of the ends, And once I've pressed that with the iron, I folded it into half once more and pressed it with my iron. And now my binding is ready to go ahead and do a little bit of sewing. So I'm going to sew along the edge here at 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to base stitch along the raw edge right here at 1/8 of an inch, and then come over and sew here at 1/8 of an inch. Do that for both pieces of your binding. All right, my binding has now been sewn, and we can go ahead and set that aside until we're ready to attach it later on in the process. Now we want to go ahead and draw out our 3/8 of an inch seam allowance along all of these right angles right here. This is going to allow us to have accurate stitching and straight lines when we turn this right side out. So make sure you go ahead and do that for the left and the right sides right here, drawing those 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then you're going to repeat that for the top process right here, just along the right angle on the left and the right hand side. You do not have to draw out the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all around that top flap right there. And lastly, you can go ahead if you'd like and draw a 3/8 of an inch line for the bottom there. And you can go ahead and have all of your seam allowances drawn out. Now, if you are working with some thin vinyl or cork, like I mentioned before, you can go ahead and not do the bottom 3/8 of an inch right there. You can leave that unsewn, so that way we can go ahead and turn it right side out straight through the bottom there, and that is a little bit easier with the thicker fabrics. Now, if you are going to work with the vinyl or the cork, instead of doing a 3/8 of an inch, you can go ahead and draw out a 3/4 of an inch line right here, and that'll tell you where you can go ahead and fold up your raw edge to meet the 3/4 of an inch line to get you to ultimately a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you would do that for your exterior and your lining piece as well. Now we're going to go ahead and place right sides together, our exterior and our lining. Go ahead and clip that into place. And you're going to go ahead and sew along the inner right angles right there, as well as the left and the right hand side and your flap closure itself. So that's all going to be sewn at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then you can go ahead and repeat that for the bottom edge if you're working with quilting cotton like I am. All right, once you've got those areas sewn, like I have done right here, we can go ahead now and trim down our seam allowances, and we also need to clip in towards all of those right angles close to the stitching without cutting the stitching. So I am going to go ahead and do that. So I've gotten really close to my stitching. Do that for all of your right angles. And now I'm going to proceed to go ahead and trim my seam allowance down to about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, now that I've got that all trimmed down, it's time to turn this right side out. So like I mentioned before, if you're working with the vinyl or the cork, you can come in and just turn from the bottom edge right here and turn everything right side out. But when you're working with cotton, what I recommend is picking the top side, either the left or the right side right here, slipping your hand in and reaching down to the opposite corner to go ahead and get this turned right side out. And it can, like I said, it can be a little tricky because it's kind of narrow there in the center. Now we're going to reach in and get the flap pulled right side out. Okay, now that I've got that turned right side out, I went ahead and pressed it with my iron. I did want to make a note not to press with your iron or your heat press over top of any of your magnets. If you do that, you may run the risk of demagnetizing your magnets. How do I know that? Well, the first time I worked with the hidden magnetic snaps in cotton fabric, I thought, oh, I can just go ahead and throw it in my press, no problem at all. And sure enough, I demagnetized my magnet, so don't do that like I did. All right, so the next step is going to be for those using vinyl or cork. If you left your bottom open, this is the time where you're going to turn in those raw edges to the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, clip that into place, and then you're going to top stitch along the bottom edge to close that up. But since I did the cotton, it's already closed up, so I don't need to worry about that step. And now we're going to go in and do some top stitching. We're not going to top stitch the entire thing. The locations that you want to do your top stitching is you're going to sew at 1/8 of an inch along this edge right here, around your flap, and over to this edge. And then you're going to go ahead and only top stitch along the straight edge right here, stopping 1/8 of an inch away from this edge right here. And repeat for this side as well. Do that for this one and this one. So we're not top stitching along these areas at this point. We're only going to do the straight sides. And lastly, you're going to top stitch along the bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I've got those areas now top stitched. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to go ahead and fold in our wings. So these portions right here, we're going to fold them in. So go ahead and get your clips. And what we want to do is we're going to fold it in so that we are matching up the sewn edge right here. So straight across, we're going to go ahead and fold that in. Add a few clips, and we might need to make some adjustments, but let's go ahead and start this way. Repeat for the opposite side. Okay, now we're going to take it, flip it over, and look to make sure that we've got a nice even rectangle right here. And visually this looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and fold this up and make sure that my width is the same on the top set of wings and the bottom set of wings, and it's the same. You can also come in and close your flap and take a look at it. Everything looks good. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to come in and top stitch along the outside edge right here, meeting up with the stitching that we did for our flap right here. So we're going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch right here and top stitch at 1/8 of an inch right here. All right, my wings have now been sewn down. Now it's time for us to grab our divider that we went ahead and sewed up previously. And we want the folded edge here to be at the top. The sewn edge is going to be at the bottom. And we are going to flip out one of our wings and match up the sides right here. Go ahead and clip this into place. And then you can go ahead and grab the opposite side of your divider and your opposite wing. Take this over to your sewing machine and you're going to base stitch this into place with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along both of these edges. Okay, now that that has been sewn, it's time to bring the opposite wing up to meet our divider pocket. So we are going to do it in this manner right here so that we have the lining matching the divider. And here is what it looks like from the top view. Now we're going to do the same thing for the opposite wing, and it is actually probably easier to do this in a moment once we get this side sewn. So let me go ahead now, and we're going to pull the wing out just like this so it's easy to sew, and we're going to base stitch this into place with 1/8 of an inch. All right, that wing has now been sewn together. Now we're going to pull the opposite wing out. Grab this wing right here, matching up the lining side of the wing with the divider pocket, just like we did on the opposite side. Clip this into place and sew this down with 1/8 of an inch base stitch. All right, now it's time for us to attach our binding. I'm using my binding that I made earlier. You can use your fold over elastic, waterproof canvas, or double fold bias tape. If you're doing the fold over elastic and or the waterproof canvas, all you got to do is grab your binding, make sure that it is cut to the length that it's indicated in the pattern. Grab out one of your wings right here, and you are going to fold the binding in half, wrapping the edge right here, and sew that on with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Now, if you are doing binding like I am right here, my own custom binding, what we're going to do is we're going to start off by grabbing one piece, and we're going to match up the raw edges right here of the binding to the raw edges of the wings. Clip that into place. We are going to sew this on with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I am going to repeat this process for the opposite wing. All right, my binding has now been attached to both sides of my wings. So you can see right here is the binding. And I did not point this out, but you want to attach the binding from the front side like I've done right here. So we've got the binding because we're going to wrap it around in just a moment. But we want to go ahead now and trim our seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. So let me get that done. You do not trim your seam allowance down whenever you are doing the waterproof canvas or the fold over elastic. You don't need to do this. Okay, so now I've got that nice and tight. I'll do that for the other side in just a moment. Now we are going to flip the binding around the raw edge right here, bringing it to the opposite side. And we're going to clip this into place. All right, once you've got that clipped into place, you are going to essentially stitch in the ditch. So if you do any kind of quilting, you'll be familiar with this process. But from the front side, we are going to place our needle along the sewn edge right here. And we are going to top stitch along, or I should say top stitch in the ditch. And that's going to be roughly at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And that will be able to allow us to go ahead and catch the back side of our binding. So let me go ahead and stitch in the ditch along this side, and I will repeat the same process for the opposite side. Okay, got my binding now sewn on both sides. And all that's left to do is add in your glasses, and your double vision case is now complete. Thank you so much for sewing along with me today. Go ahead and purchase your double vision case at sewyours.com. I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description box below. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. And please stop by our Facebook group to share photos of your completed double vision cases. Thank you so much. Now that I've sewn mine, it's time to sew yours.